In 1936, the German war industry had a production capacity 3 times greater than France. Its land and air armies are rearming and strengthening in plain sight of everyone, while the German Navy is getting a makeover with the blessing of the British. In fact, Germany's rearmament began much earlier than Hitler's rise to power, starting as early as 1922. I propose to explore this surprising topic today. After understanding the origin of German rearmament, it is essential to understand the foundation on which it is based. After World War I, Europe remained in chaos, especially in the East. And the signing of the Treaty of Versailles in June 1919 does not stop the conflicts that are taking place there. However, the greatest betrayal of the Treaty of Versailles spirit occurs in the year it was signed. Thus, the United States of America, Great Britain, and France were, in fact, to be its guarantors, notably by uniting their forces within a 3-way alliance, which was called the Atlantic Alliance. The League of Nations, a precursor to the United Nations created by the Treaty of Versailles, was intended to facilitate peaceful conflict resolution, as well as the disarmament of nations. However, these two commitments, which would have allowed proper execution of the Treaty of Versailles, over time, rapidly lost Anglo-Saxon support. In November 1919, the American Congress rejected the Treaty of Versailles, imposing a return to isolationism. In order to comply with its signature, it then approves a discounted version. In this scenario, the United States has no allies and does not take part in the League of Nations. On their side, the British aim to maintain a balance of power in continental Europe, all at a lower cost. The Atlantic Alliance mechanically forces the British to side with France in order to enforce the Treaty of Versailles, including by force. This commitment, potentially costly, prevents them from acting as a continental arbiter by siding with different camps based on the situation. Thus, the British government takes advantage of the opening offered by the American exit from the alliance to do the same. And this has a major consequence. France thus becomes the only power to ensure the proper execution of the Treaty of Versailles. This point is significant, as in 1919, France is demographically drained, heavily indebted, and its industry alone, although powerful, cannot measure up to the German industry. In contrast to this, Germany is aware of its strength and has difficulty accepting its defeat, as we have seen in a previous documentary. As a result, she is hesitant to rapidly adhere to the conditions placed upon her. Compounding the problem, France is engaged in several local conflicts, particularly with Poland, which is exploiting the region's political instability to, in turn, ignore the Treaty of Versailles. And yes, it may be surprising, but at the time of the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, Poland is at war on several fronts, particularly against the Soviets, but also with almost all of its neighbors outside of Germany. Under the impetus of Marshal Pilsudski, a supporter of what he calls Greater Poland, the country opts for an aggressive policy and pushes its borders 200 kilometers to the east. To grasp the magnitude of this conquest, it equals the distance from Paris to Lille, which is considerable. But what is the connection between the Polish conquests at the end of the First World War and German rearmament? These conquests create tensions across Eastern Europe that lasts until World War II begins. Ultimately, these tensions will be the deciding factor. When France is abandoned by the Anglo-Saxons, it obviously does not remain inactive, and they look for solutions. And it is precisely in the East that she identifies several opportunities. The young countries there, each seeking to stabilize and secure their independence. This is how France forms an alliance with several European countries, including Czechoslovakia, Romania, Yugoslavia, and Poland. This helps balance power in relation to Germany. The heart of these alliances forms what is called the Little Entente, but they are fragile due to the territorial rivalries mentioned, preventing any stable cooperation. Therefore, despite these agreements being an excellent geopolitical solution to the problems of each involved party, the territorial issues that the Treaty of Versailles did not resolve, and that the League of Nations is no more able to solve, mean that these agreements do not last over time. This idea, while well-founded, does not practically allow for rebalancing the power dynamic between France and Germany. And this may be surprising, but in this same spirit of seeking a solution to the East with the aim of maintaining some form of pressure on Germany, France seeks to strengthen ties with a regime that Westerners fear. And yes, it is Soviet Russia. So it was in 1936 that the country reached a timid agreement with the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. But this agreement is actually anecdotal and symbolic, since it practically obliges nothing. The situation remains fragile due to France's diplomatic isolation and the opposition from a significant part of the country's historical partners. Unsurprisingly, Poland, which the communist regime attempted to eradicate from the map just years prior, views this agreement unfavorably. The British side is also fundamentally hostile to communism. France refrains from getting too involved in this story to assess the situation while avoiding further straining its precarious diplomatic position. In this context, where France is practically alone and aware of its isolation, German rearmament becomes possible. But what form did it take, and when did it really begin? Despite being a common belief, German rearmament began several years before Adolf Hitler's rise to power. It was in 1922, not 1933, that Germany, albeit democratic post-World War I, started rearming with the surprising aid of the Soviets. This violated the Treaty of Versailles, signed just 3 years prior. In parallel, Germany tries not to pay the reparations owed to the victorious powers. However, this starts poorly for them as France forcefully sends its army to occupy the powerful industrial region of La Ruhr, with the support of Belgium and Italy. This occupation enables Germany to be brought back to negotiations, albeit forcefully, but with the goal of resolving the situation. The occupation of this crucial territory greatly affects Germany's economy, already weakened by the nation's political instability. And all the more so as the German elites are pushing the populations of the occupied territories to passive resistance and strike, further damaging the country's production capacities. Thus, the German economic situation deteriorates rapidly and reduces its rearmament capacities for a time. However, the situation flips for the first time in 1924 when the majority in the French parliament changes. It falls into the hands of the cartel of the left, a broad political coalition centered on the left at the time. The French position then becomes more accommodating, considering Germany's economic state and the high expense of the French occupation, encouraging decision-makers to try to find a diplomatic solution to the situation. This is how the new government orders its army to leave Ruhr without any real counterpart. While the stance is understandable, it strips France of a strong pressure tactic. Due to insufficient international support, the French government's only solution is renegotiation, to reducing the total reparations Germany owed to France. By not pushing the power struggle to its limit despite having the advantage, France emerges as the loser of the situation due to the high cost involved. The country thus only manages to exacerbate Franco-German relations while creating deep resentment within the German population, without even obtaining the due payment. This event signals to the German government that arm wrestling against France is not only possible, but winnable. And this is all the more true as the Americans, as much as the British, consistently in view of their own interests, have once again not sided on the side of international law, i.e. alongside the French, although the country has only applied the Treaty of Versailles, which they co-signed. But despite this, from the mid-1920s, a wind of hope blows again over Europe. The wheel's withdrawal creates an appeasing atmosphere that favors diplomatic solutions. French politician Aristide Briand becomes the champion of European reconciliation and a peacefully regulated international geopolitics under the League of Nations. Fundamentally, a whole part of the French people then want peace, and the representatives of the nation thus carry this will. And It is this new posture of France that allows Germany to join the League of Nations in 1926. Germany aims to normalize relations and reposition itself within the concert of nations, while not fully implementing the Treaty of Versailles. Germany's arrival in the League of Nations thus offers it a global platform, while the French desire for appeasement automatically provides a means of pressure for the Germans. All they have to do is threaten to withdraw from the League of Nations, which would effectively lose its substance in order to gradually impose their views. The German representatives thus cleverly use this diplomatic forum to undermine the Treaty of Versailles by trying to highlight its injustice and inconsistency. This approach was taken in 1927. The International Military Control Commission, tasked with overseeing and confirming the German disarmament as per the treaty, departs Germany and is to be replaced by a control of the League of Nations. But the real question is, at this stage, where is the German rearmament really at? Well, while the country has been partly disarmed since a good part of its armament was destroyed at the end of the war, and the fortifications dismantled, the controls which must take place under the Treaty of Versailles are difficult to apply in practice. The typical example involves armament factories converted post-war, but which effectively remain capable of clandestinely producing military equipment. Similarly, the war's end allowed paramilitary structures to emerge, effectively providing a strong reserve of men for the German army, which thus unofficially and largely exceeds the limit of 100,000 men set by the treaty. The existence of a war school and a general staff is also denounced, but no action is taken. Indeed, it is easy for us who know the sequence of events to pass a harsh judgment on Western nations. However, it is just as important to keep in mind that a good part of the Western populations who experienced the violence and harshness of the First World War are simply in favor of peace. This is what pushes a whole part of the European political elites to take a pacifist stance, and even if it means turning a blind eye to blatant violations of established principles. At the end of the First World War, on its side, Germany, although democratic, is nonetheless preparing its strong comeback in the shadows. The country then couples its entirely legitimate desire to reintegrate into the concert of nations with a hidden rearmament. This started as early as the 1920s, after the Treaty of Rapallo. Secret military training in Russia increases its army budget under the guise of subsidies, intensifies its steel production in Sweden, and develops new tank prototypes. However, it is only in 1929 that European hopes for peace are dealt a death blow. While Europe struggles to recover from the Great War, a severe economic crisis emerges in the United States before crossing the Atlantic the next year. Germany is thus hard hit by the crisis as early as 1930, while France is truly shaken only from 1931 onwards. This situation of economic chaos weakens France, a country that truly forms the keystone of the League of Nations. And it's at that moment that the institution finishes losing its credibility. Thus, when Japan invades Manchuria in 1931, the League of Nations orders the country to withdraw its troops, but in vain. Despite this situation, no sanctions are pronounced and Japan continues its operations. This weakening, coupled with the French desire to rely on diplomatic solutions, allows Germany to obtain the principle of equal rights in terms of armament. In December 1932, the previously hidden rearmament can then be done openly. A significant part of the French political elite thus continues to indulge in pacifist illusions and remains strangely blind to the growing threat. Despite multiple warnings from both the diplomatic corps and the networks of the French army, which note the restarting of the German war machine. Despite this, the situation in Germany is not at all shiny. Mired in an economic crisis from which it cannot escape, Germany is struggling primarily because of persistent political instability and profound societal divisions. And it is in this context of crisis and resentment that one man will stand out. Of course, it's Adolf Hitler. Fueled by Germany's political and economic turmoil, the Germans' widespread discontent, and their wish to overturn the Treaty of Versailles. He gradually climbed the ranks of power until he seized it in 1933. In 1933 years after the last French forces left, he ordered the remilitarization of the Rhineland, and the Treaty of Versailles is then openly violated. And yet France does not send any division to enforce international law in Germany. But why didn't she do it? Well, that will be the subject of the next documentary, and if you're interested in the topic, subscribe. Moreover, did you know that this chaotic situation originates from an American election that took place on November 8th, 1918? Surprised? The next documentary is perfect for you.